Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. We're going to take just a few minutes to let the room populate before we begin. We'll get started at about 3:02. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Just a reminder, we're going to give the room about one more minute to let everyone get in, and then we'll get started. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Maggie Bowman. I'm the Director of Programming for Getting Real at the IDA, and I'm really happy that you've all logged in to join us today for this conversation on navigating the awards in 2020 and 2021. It's really a stellar panel, and I'm excited to hear what everyone has to say. I want to start by letting you know I'm coming to you today from Chicago, Illinois, which is the occupied land of the Kickapoo, Sioux, Potawatomi, Peoria, and the Miami peoples who have been stewards of this land for generations. We'd like to acknowledge the indigenous people whose land we stand on today. And I invite you to introduce yourself in the chat, let us know where you're calling in from, and offer your own land acknowledgement if you can in the chat window. Just a few housekeeping items. We will be keeping the chat open throughout the session. We ask you to use the Q&A tool for submitting questions to any of the panelists. We'll be doing a Q&A at the end, the last 15 minutes of the hour-long session, but please feel free to pop your questions in there whenever they come to you, and we'll keep them on hand and get through as many of them as we can in the last 15 minutes. We will also be recording today's video, and we will post it in a few days. The video will be, when posted, will be post-captioned, and there will be a transcript available. And just want to let you know, if you want to turn on the closed captioning for this session, you can do so. There should be a CC button on the bottom of your window. Just a quick thank you to our funders, the City of Los Angeles Department of Cultural Affairs, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, Hollywood Foreign Press Association, the Jonathan Logan Family Foundation, and LA County Arts and Culture. So before we dive into this conversation, I just want to make some space at the top to acknowledge that there is a significant conversation happening in the field and in the larger world about access and power. And in the context of that conversation, thinking about what role awards plays in our landscape is something that I think a lot of us are talking about. We're challenging it, questioning it perhaps. And part of this is because we're all aware that awards campaigns are very expensive and not everyone has the resources for that. So I'm just mentioning that at the top of this conversation to just ask us all to think about how can we show up for our field in this moment to help make this a more level playing field. And to the panelists, whatever way that comes into your conversations, into your comments, please feel free to address. But also for everyone listening, I think that's just a really important question to ask yourselves right now. I'd like to start by introducing Tom Oyer, who's the Associate Director of Member Relations and Awards at AMPAS. And Tom has all the good info that you're looking for. So let's just, I'll kick it over to Tom.
Okay, great. Can you hear me all right? Thank you, Maggie, for handing me off to me. Thank you for putting this together. This is really great avenue to be able to have these conversations however we can, obviously, in the changing landscape that we're going through right now. So, I mean, I just wanted to kind of give a brief overview of just kind of some of the changes we've made to try to start figuring our way through this. But I want to emphasize from the very beginning that this is an ongoing process. It is evolving, that we clearly do not have the answers. We don't know how this is all going to transpire, but I wanted to at least emphasize that we're aware that it's going to have to be an ongoing process. Just to explain a little bit, I work at the Academy of Motion Pictures, and I work very closely with the members of the documentary branch, and specifically with the documentary branch executive committee, which is made up of members from the documentary branch. So these are filmmakers that are, documentary filmmakers, amazing documentary filmmakers that are on this committee that I work very closely with. So just please know that, when we're working through this, and the committee, oversees all of these cases of rules and eligibility, that those are the folks that, we're working closely together to figure out our path forward. So what I can at least do is that you may have heard some of the initial changes that the Academy's been making with some of our rules. The first one was just kind of, we really need to figure out, when theaters closed in March, we needed to first figure out the films that had planned theatrical releases in March, April, May, June, etc. So what we adapted the rules for in that case was saying that if films had a previous planned theatrical release, but they are shown, they're launched or shown on commercial streaming or VOD service or television broadcast while the theaters are closed, that they may still qualify for the 93rd Academy Awards, and those films would just provide some sort of proof of a planned theatrical release, such as a theater letter or contract, or some sort of executed deal that demonstrates intent for a film to be released in 2020 by a theatrical distributor. So those were some of the initial steps we've taken for those films. They provide those films to us through the submission process, and we make those films available to our documentary branch members, which we're about to start doing, and we'll be doing that throughout the year. If there's films that are in special situations, and we know everyone's going to be in a completely unique situation, we are convening and working with that documentary branch exec committee. Like I said, of those members, I'll be working closely with them to review all kinds of special cases or films to determine who, films that had a planned theatrical, just to some degree. I think the other thing that we made changes on was also expanding our qualifying festival list to help for a lot of those films that maybe we're planning to have a theatrical launch in the spring, whether it's South by, Full Frame, Hot Docs, Tribeca, etc., that those films we're then hoping to have a spring festival launch to then get distribution for planned theatrical later in the year. So the committee also looked at expanding our qualifying festival process. So that is also something that we've done recently. And I should say right off the bat that for all of this information that I'm talking about, and hopefully not rambling on too much about, is available online on our website, which is www.oscars.org/rules. So again, that's Oscars with an S.org/rules. That's our rules homepage. We always update anything new and changing and evolving. We update it there. There's special sections for documentary feature and documentary short. In there is where you have details such as the submission requirements or the qualifying festival list. And so on there, if you look at the documentary feature, we did say that due to the mandatory theater closures, the executive committee has expanded the qualifying festival list to include additional festival awards from the first half of 2020. This process is ongoing, and the committee will continue to monitor the situation. So for this, we added in that if a documentary may qualify by being programmed in 2 of the following festivals. So that includes Berlin, CPH Docs, Full Frame, Hot Docs, San Francisco, South by Southwest, Sundance, Tribeca, and True False. Again, we focused on the first half of 2020 initially for those films that we're planning to, premiere there. So that way some films, may be eligible by having been programmed into. We do not say that they had to participate in, some festivals did an online version of their festival. We're not saying they had to participate. We're saying they had to be programmed, being invited to participate, whether or not they ended up doing. Some, aren't able to do the online process with those festivals, but we wanted to at least have that as a method. Additionally, we added some additional qualifying awards from some of those festivals. Normally, the documentary feature qualifying festival list is international only, but this year we felt like, for considering the situation, we wanted to expand that list for the first half of 2020. The key there being, we don't know what the landscape is going to be of when and to what degree theaters open and when, and so we may need to expand that qualifying festival list for additional festivals from later in the calendar year. That I just want to acknowledge it right off the bat. I'm sure a lot of you are going to ask that question anyways, but basically that is something that we're going to have to look at and decide on whether or not we expand the list down the road. But we wanted to at least try to address a lot of the films that were first impacted in the first half of 2020 because of the closures. So as far as okay, I guess that's a good summary of some of the initial changes we made. How does that sound, Maggie? Is there something I'm forgetting?
That sounds good. I did one question I wanted to ask is because I know that the voting members of the documentary branch, that pool has expanded a lot in recent years. Mm-hmm. So I wonder if you could just tell us how many people is that? Mm-hmm. How has it expanded and changed in recent years? And do you know when you'll be making announcements of the newest members that will be inducted this year?
Right. Yes. Sorry. I realized that I also went straight into the immediate changes because that's what my brain was focused on. But as far as the overall view of it, I do want to emphasize that for the Academy, that nominations for each category are determined by the branch of members. So, for example, the nominations for film editing are by the members of the film editors branch, writers, directors, etc. So when it comes to documentary, for both doc feature and doc short, those categories, the nominees are determined by just the members within the documentary branch of the Academy. Right now, there's around 500 members of the branch, which has significantly grown over the last few years. We've really been making an effort to reach, just this past year, we reached gender parity with our membership for the branch, and have definitely been looking at expanding more internationally. So it's around 500 members currently. We are announcing new members this week, so that will be coming. So there will be some additional folks being invited. I will explain for the doc branch, it's unique in the sense of a lot of branches in the Academy are based on craft, such, like I said, film editors, writers, producers, directors, but documentary is a unique one in that it is a community branch of directors, producers, some documentary editors, cinematographers, composers, etc. So there is a unique mix of folks within the doc community there in the branch, which I think is significant thing to point out.
So this week, you said you'll be announcing new members.
New members will be announced this week, and the members of the documentary branch are the ones that we provide films to throughout the year. So we'll be starting that process all very soon as well. And what we do is we provide the films to members monthly, usually monthly batches throughout summer into the fall. And so we would, for any films that potentially may be eligible either through the festivals that we make our expanded qualifying festival list, or if any films had a planned theatrical at some point and want to talk to us about, how to navigate all this. Like I said, you can go to the rules page to review the requirements, submission requirements. There's also an email on there. You can email us for inquiries. The general email for documentaries is literally documentaries@oscars.org. So documentaries plural @oscars.org. That's general inquiries on submissions. We're happy to help you figure it out. We understand it's confusing, but just know that we're asking for the films throughout the year. We do provide them to our members. So I think sometimes some people assume, oh, well, we wait and qualify or wait and submit close to the deadline date because that's later for the members. But I think a lot of the members love to watch the films year round, and we'd love to get as many out to the members as early as possible. I think we all agree to your point, Maggie, about the long journey of the awards campaigns, the whole thing that you're talking about awards campaigns being so expensive, we do what we can, at least administratively on our part, to really, we treat every film fairly and equally. We provide the films to our members. We do assigned viewing requirements to make sure all films get equally assigned by equal number of members. And so the earlier that we can get films, the better, because we want the members to have as much time as possible to watch. So, you know, I definitely hear you on that. And I'm, you know, at least we try to do what we can administratively.
Yeah.
On our end. So.
And I know that David has some really good tips that he'll probably be sharing later about, you know, just really focusing your campaigns on members, and this idea that there are so many members who, like all of us, are at home right now and have plenty of time to watch things is something to keep in mind.
Yes.
I know we'll also, when we come back later, I think that really breaking down theatrical, because that's that field that distribution sector is changing so rapidly.
Right.
So we'll get into what defines that and how that could change.
Right, and I will say that we did put in the rules, and this is Academy-wide for all categories, that when theaters do reopen down the road, you know, we also are expanding it to additional cities, so there isn't that same, because there's concern about there being like a backlog of films, right, that wanted to do theatrical to qualify. So we've expanded it to LA, New York, San Francisco, Chicago, Atlanta, and Miami. And so to make it clear, it's a 7-day qualifying run in one of those cities, not, you know, the multiple. So but that
in Chicago,
we don't know when that will happen or when that will be. So
right. Okay. Thank you so much, Tom. We'll come back to you. I wanted to go now to my colleague at the IDA, Ranell Shubert, who is the awards competition manager. And Ranell has seen the awards she's played different roles in the awards over the years. And so she has a really interesting perspective on how it's changed. And so Ranell, I would just love to hear a little bit about, first of all, if you could just break down for people what the IDA awards are in terms of categories, because there are different categories in some other awards. And also just to describe a little bit the curation process and then sort of, you know, changes this year.
Sure, thanks. Hi, everyone. So you know, with the IDA Awards, it's our intention to really celebrate the best overall of documentary in the year. So it's not just highlighting the best of feature and best of short, but we have other categories as well. So we also have our series categories. We have 4 of those. We also have craft categories, which include best editing, best director, best cinematography, best original song. We also acknowledge audio documentary and have an audio documentary category, which both series and standalone audio docs are eligible for that. We also have a new category which came to us last year, which was best music doc, which is just features only. And then of course we have a student category as well. So we try to celebrate a very wide range of projects and forms, you know, in our award show. You know, the Oscars are important. And how we sit in that calendar, the awards campaigning calendar. You know, we recognize the value of our shortlist and our nominee lists in that announcement sort of calendar. So we are, and we also recognize that a lot of folks aren't really sure what they're doing with their films right now. And a lot of folks aren't really sure if they're going to be doing their awards campaign this year. And so in response to that, we have decided to push the IDA Awards to January. Normally they take place in the first week of December, but this year we've decided to push to the 3rd week of January. Currently our call for entries are open. They will remain open. We're gonna make a much larger announcement around these dates tomorrow. But we will keep our call for entries open, and we will just extend our a regular deadline until July 28th. And then we're going to, and then officially submissions will close with our extended deadline on August 4th. If you have a project that maybe you won't have a screener by August 4th, we do have a form for anybody who has a late submission that they can fill out the form. We will be accepting those projects on a case-by-case basis. The whole idea really is that we're trying to be as flexible as possible, but as long as you're in communication with us about what is happening with your project, we can be really flexible. But again, it's about the communication. So really it starts with entering the form, which is linked to our FAQ. Or you can, of course, just reach out to us at awards@documentary.org with any questions that you may have. I also want to mention, for any independent producer who is unable to submit to our award show, we do charge a fee for submissions. If you feel like that fee is too high for you, or you're just financially unable to reach that fee, we are offering waivers to folks. We do have a waiver request form, which again is also linked to our FAQ. That form will close on July 28th. So please, again, if you want to make a request, get your request in. The sooner you get a request in, the sooner we can give you a notification about whether you are going to receive that request or not. We will definitely make sure to get back to everybody before submissions close officially on August 4th. I also want to mention that we have changed our shortlist announcement to October 28th. The reason why it's an important date to know about, mostly because it's uncertain what a lot of folks are going to be doing with their releases this year, and whether they're going to be doing Oscar campaigns this year or the following. So we wanted to give people the option that if you want to remove your project from competition before our shortlist announcement on October 28th, you may do that. And then as long as it, again, is pulled before that October 28th deadline, we will transfer the fee and the project itself to the following year competition. But you need to communicate with us first, and just to make sure in order for that project to be eligible for the following year.
So that'd be very key for a film that, let's say, maybe has already qualified for the Oscars through their festival participation. They maybe don't have distribution, and they just haven't quite figured out their strategy for distribution, let alone awards this year. And so it doesn't hurt, you're saying, to go ahead and apply for the IDA awards, because you will not be penalized if you, in October, decide, you know what, we're going to hold off because, we have some information now about our distribution happening next year, for example.
Exactly. That's exactly what we're trying to, issues that we're trying to alleviate. Exactly. We will have a nominee announcement. Our nominee announcement will come around the end of November. And then after we do our nominee announcements, best feature and best short then gets voted on by the IDA membership. And then of course winners are announced in January. Just to speak a little bit about IDA awards judging and the committees themselves. The committees are they are arranged of filmmaking peers, just as in the Oscars, but we also include industry professionals as well. The curation of our lists when it comes to the short list and our nominees, and who are those folks that are comprising, that are making those decisions around those lists, is something that's definitely on my mind every single day. And I'm working very, very closely with our chairs to really make sure that we have the widest range of inclusion and representation on those committees as we possibly can. I am tracking demographics, and I'm hoping to release those demographics in January when we release the names of those jury members as well. We don't do that until in January, until the awards themselves have been announced. You know, the IDA Awards is probably one of the most open and accessible awards out there. In order to be eligible for the IDA Awards, we don't do any kind of qualifying whatsoever, really. It's either you have a project that is completed or has a release between the dates of October 1st, 2019 and December 31st, 2020. We just really think it's really important, especially, you know, it's important for us to have a really accessible and open competition, you know, especially in a year in which so many projects are struggling for distribution. We do hope that, you know, our open process will sort of catch some of those films that slip through the cracks. But, you know, it's really for us, we really try to take the money and the financial aspects, you know, out of this competition. But then again, you know, if it's again, really what's important is that shortlist date, October 28th. The deadline for submissions themselves will be August 4th. Again, you need financial support, or if you feel like you're gonna have a late submission, please just reach out to us. We're here to help. I'm happy to have a chat with anybody as well if you just, you know, have any questions and you just want somebody else to run your plans by. I'm happy to chat. Again, you can reach us at awards@documentary.org.
Great. Thank you so much, Ranell. And IDA has that because of calendar. It's one of the earliest on the calendar. So, okay, because there's been a lot of good information there. Panelists, I'm gonna switch it up a little bit. I'm gonna bring everyone up now so that we can just get into the group conversation. Just because I want to make sure that we leave room for some questions. So I want to introduce the rest of our panel here. And we'll hear a little bit we can go around and each one of you can talk a bit. David Magdael is a publicist working for many years and lots of great documentaries, and has a really unique perspective on how to run a campaign. Angela Tucker is the producer of Belly of the Beast. Erika Cohn is the director of Belly of the Beast, an incredible film that premiered at Human Rights Watch Film Festival a couple of weeks ago that I highly recommend seeing. And then we've got Chris Albert from National Geographic documentary films, and who's going to talk about at least one film that they're planning on qualifying. So let's just go around. David, one thing when we had a conversation prepping for this, you posed a really interesting question. Does this time frame and this new calendar allow you to cultivate your champions? What do you mean by that? What does that way of thinking about running an awards campaign look like?
I think that's something. Can you guys hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think it's just something that I know when we take a look at running these campaigns for awards and for the Oscars, it's really finding those champions who are championing your film. At the end of the day, no matter how much money you spend out there, how many dinners you throw or you invite, your film has to resonate. So remember that. And it also, so we're looking for, take a look at your film. I know a lot of people are like, oh, I just, my film was supposed to go to Tribeca and then it didn't. I mean, we didn't play it and all the things. You guys just need to breathe. Take a breather. Tom's been great. Thank you, Tom, at AMPAS for keeping everybody abreast. The cool thing is we're all in this, in the same boat together because everyone is charting new waters. It's not like it was in 2019, not like it was in 2018. I've been doing this since 1999. And so we've seen the changes kind of come through. So we're just going through another change. And it's going to be great because I think there's a lot of people that have some really great projects that are out there. So when we were talking about finding your champions, it's something we always talk about when we take on new films. Who is championing this film? Who do we have that's part of our production company, a part of our producers that we know are documentary branch members in the Academy that could possibly talk to their friends or know that they have, some skin in the game so that way they can at least get them to watch it. So that's really finding those champions, but also looking outside of that and finding maybe those community groups or finding your audience that's really going to champion your film. I mean, look at the time we're living in, right? Where we've got COVID, we've got Black Lives Matter, we've got a revolution that we're all in the middle of. So the question is going to be, what's going to float to the top? What's going to be that one, and will your film make it? And I think a lot of times, a lot of them could. You know, will my music documentary make it through there? Well, is your music documentary inspiring? Take a look at what the last, say, 5 to 10 years of what everyone voted on for Shortlist and for the actual 5. And you can see how people voted. And the biggest thing that comes out really is what emotion did that film really like convey to the people that are voting? You know, but then take a look at your people that you have in there. If you've got people that are part of the doc branch that are, you know, that people like, it's always a good thing, because then people will start to look at that. So like, I think Tom was saying there's 500 people, I think it's like 523. The guys are probably gonna add another 100. So we're looking at a little over 600 people. So that's who when we're talking about Oscars, that's who we're talking about. But be smart. Go outside of that and look at the whole group of people who love documentaries, people who are like talking about them, and to get your film in front of those people. So we're talking. Another thing was like, oh, I'm not going to go theatrical. Who knows if theaters are going to open? Honey, everybody's at home. So think about in that virtual space if that works for you and how that can work. I think that can help level that playing field. You have options that are there. I think if anything, with the pandemic, it really made us stop and think, how do we get films that are documentaries to the marketplace? How do we get seen? You know, I think with this, it feels like it could level the playing field. So films that couldn't necessarily always be seen, that didn't play at other places, might be able to get through and find those audiences again. So speaking to finding your audience, take a look at the film, who those people are that you know will be the champions. I mean, it's great for Erika to have been opening night for the Human Rights Watch Film Festival, and getting that conversation going. Then the question that you have to ask yourself, how do I keep it current between now and February 1st when the first votes start for the shortlist? I think that's always going to be key. And for us, it's always been screen. Get as many of the people to see it, get many people to be talking about it. Because there is no magic bullet. It wasn't like, oh, what if I call call so-and-so that's in the branch? Maybe they can do something, maybe. But at the end of the day, it's really your film. Your film has to really resonate.
Great, thank you so much. With that, I'd like to go talk about Belly of the Beast. And Angela, maybe you could start by telling us what, before COVID, what was the plan for the distribution of the film? What was the plan for qualifying it? And actually, if you could start by just telling us what the film is, that would be great.
So Belly of the Beast is about a duo who discover that illegal forced sterilizations are happening in prisons in California. And this is sort of their fight to bring that to light and to get justice in the best way that they can. So this is a movie that's been like maybe 8 years in the making when Erika first kind of started. And so we were given the tremendous honor of being the opening night film for Human Rights Watch. So that was the perfect launch for the film because we have a very sort of aggressive engagement campaign. And that's really, for us, kind of the utmost importance, which was really about doing a campaign for people in the free world and then doing a campaign for people inside prison. So the first part of it was the free world. So we premiered at Human Rights Watch, and then we were going to, four-wall it really to have a theatrical run or, work with a distributor to do that. But, once Human Rights Watch happened, then, COVID came pretty soon after it. And we did have a broadcast with a commitment with Independent Lens. And so we thought we were just going to do community screenings and the theatrical runs for like a year and then kind of show later in 2021, which is sort of like the typical trajectory, like sort of you premiere and then you have like a year of screenings and then your broadcast. But we decided to kind of do a completely different thing once all of this happened, which Erika can talk more about.
Great, thank you. Erika, what's the new plan?
So as Angela mentioned, we really wanted to seize the moment and the film's timeliness in this moment. And we're really excited to announce our theatrical release in late September, early October with the Roxy Theater and the Rafael Film Center in the San Francisco Bay Area, with special screenings in partnership with the Mill Valley Film Festival. So we're really focusing on running our impact campaign and a legislative and reparations campaign simultaneously to compensate both historical and contemporary sterilization survivors, to notify the survivors who still don't know that they were sterilized, and receive a public apology. So we're really looking forward to kind of our full distribution rollout, as Angela mentioned, you know, our broadcast on Independent Lens being now in late November. So having that screening window impact campaign between now and September, October, when our theatrical release will be, and then broadcast in November.
So I think that when I was so struck by the fact that because of this moment and the urgency of everything that's gone on this year with the social uprising and COVID, and thinking about these questions of Black bodies and people in prison, I'm just like, the idea that you switched your broadcast, and can you just talk about that? Because that seems like that was the biggest piece that you moved, the biggest piece that was kind of in place that you thought might happen in a year. And can you just talk about the decision to move forward with that change, and then how everything else fits in around that?
Yeah, I mean, we knew that this was kind of a unique moment for the film. You know, when you make a film, you have no idea what's going to be happening in the world, and you have no idea how the film is going to really resonate. And with this film, this was really the moment for people to really be able to listen to the issues that are happening in the film, and be able to take it in, and be able to look at how it really is a part of kind of the larger protests that are happening with Black Lives Matter. So we also just decided that we really wanted to spearhead this ourselves. Like, we called the Roxy, we used relationships that we had, and we all together sort of came up with this plan. And I mentioned that because what you said in the beginning, Maggie, is so important in terms of, you know, it is very expensive to do these campaigns. And though we sort of had a theoretical plan, it was like, you know, it wasn't like we had a ton of money in the bank to say, this is what we're gonna do, you know? So when this happened, because we knew this movie had to be out now more than ever, we had to really kind of take this on ourselves. And we wanted to use all of the momentum from the various steps. So from the festival, and then the theatrical, and then having that lead us to the broadcast. So it's just like, we're just building and building and building community all along the way.
Right, and all of that feeds into your impact goals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great. Okay, Chris, let's hear from you. What films, you've been through many different awards campaigns for films, and I'm just curious what's going on film-wise at National Geographic this year, and how does this current calendar and set of changes that's going on affect the strategy that you're going to use with the film?
Yeah, sure. First, thanks so much for inviting me. Great to be with such a good group of people. You know, before I answer that, I'm going to just add on to something that David said that I think is so important, which is finding your champions for your film. And it's not just talking to the producer and director of your film. You should talk to the editor, you should talk to the writer, you should talk to the cinematographer, because as Tom mentioned, the doc branch isn't exclusive just to directors or producers. It also includes editors and writers, and you know, the doc branch is very tight knit. So when you're finding those champions, don't, you know, talk to everybody who worked on your film, and find out, you know, when you pull your whole entire, you know, production, you'll end up with a pretty good list of people, most likely, who might be in the Academy or know someone in the Academy. So it's really important to, like, you know, dig deep among your film and see who everybody knows, because I think that's something that a lot of people take for granted. But, you know, we've had a lot of success you know, editors talk to editors, writers talk to writers, they all talk to each other. And so make sure your champions, you know, that you're digging deep to find as many as you can. At National Geographic, you know, we have a film that premiered at Sundance called Rebuilding Paradise, directed by Ron Howard, about the fires in Paradise, California. And so, you know, we've been, you know, I think the key this year is sort of flexibility. and being willing to pivot your plans, which I think, Erika and Angela spoke to that very eloquently, and working with your filmmakers to understand, what is in best service of the film. So for Rebuilding Paradise, we still are, we were in Sundance and Tribeca, so technically qualified, but we're still pursuing a theatrical is the plan right now. And we announced July 31st. So that's what we're aiming towards. We have no idea what exactly that's going to look like right now. And of course, 2 hours after we picked that date, Tenet moved back 4 weeks or 3 weeks. So, it's still theoretical, and we could push a week or two. But we're committed to doing some kind of a theatrical. I think the film deserves it. It's directed by Ron Howard. We're really invested, in all of our feature docs. We want to pursue a theatrical before we broadcast it on the network. And so that's our plan for Rebuilding Paradise. We'll see how it sort of plays out between now and the end of the summer. There's no real hard timeline other than we would like to broadcast it on the network time to the anniversary of the fires, which is in November. So we have sort of a little bit of runway between now and November when the anniversary of the fires occurs. And we obviously don't want to try to be in theaters in the fall, because I think there's going to be a real logjam of, feature films trying to, as the calendar keeps shrinking, the number of films keeps growing. And the other thing I think I would just quickly add is that I think, like a lot of people who work at studios and networks, I oversee awards, not just for Oscars, but Emmys and everything in between. So, as the COVID shutdown occurred, it was right at the beginning of Emmy season. And so I think for a lot of places, it's been a bit of an experiment on how to do awards campaigning in COVID times. And we've been trying to learn a lot from our Emmy campaigns that we can apply to Oscar campaigns. And some of the lessons that I'm happy to share, virtual screenings have been a huge hit, whether it's a television show or a feature doc or anything in between. We actually just did one last night. We have 2 documentaries airing on the network tomorrow. They're not feature docs, but on Everest, we had 900 people at our virtual screening last night. We've also found that doing them on the weekends, we've had a little bit better turnout than during the weekdays, because just like everyone watching, you're on Zoom for 14 hours a day. The last thing you want to do on a Thursday night is sit down and then watch a 2-hour movie on your computer and listen to a Q&A. But doing them on the weekends has actually proven to be pretty successful, because people have had a break from their computer and are willing to log on and watch a movie and do a Q&A. We're doing a big virtual premiere for Rebuilding Paradise on July 12th. We actually sent a blast out to all IDA members today to invite them to that. So hopefully everyone listening got that invite. I encourage you all to come. The other thing we've been trying to do is be flexible on the time of the premieres. Some of them we've been doing East Coast and West Coast virtual premiere. So we'll do it at 6 o'clock East Coast and then repeat it at 6 o'clock West Coast. That allows you multiple time zones in the US and outside of the US where people can have the option to tune in and listen. And the last quick piece I'll say is, just being creative. For our Emmy campaign, we created a podcast, because there were no events and there were no dinners and there were no screenings. So we rediverted some of those funds and created a podcast, one for each of our Emmy eligible shows. And it was extremely successful. It's called Consider This. It's on iTunes, everywhere you can listen to podcasts. And I think it's something we might try for other awards campaigns and just sort of grow the Consider This podcast franchise that we sort of started for awards. So I think it's being nimble, it's being flexible, and it's being creative. And if you combine those 3 things, I think that no one knows. I don't even know what's going to happen tonight when I turn on the news, much less next week or next month. So it just continues to change and evolve, and working with your filmmakers. And I think just being in touch with your filmmakers and talking to them as much as possible and making them part of the process of how you're evolving your campaign, given the climate, is really key. Sorry, that was a very long answer.
No, that was great. Lots of great tips in there. And I think that this ability to, the virtual screenings, that you can reach audiences more directly, and people are getting very creative with ways to do it, I think is potentially may have a leveling effect on the playing field. Okay, I want to go to some audience questions now. And Tom, first of all, we've got a rules question here. there seems to be a discrepancy between the qualifying runtime period listed on the AMPAS rules. In the general entry rules, it is listed as January 1st to January 1st, 2020 to February 28th, 2021. And on the special rules for doc awards, the eligibility period ends September 30th, as it always has. Is the latter page just not updated yet? And can you just clarify those dates?
Yeah, no problem. I realized that after I gave my spiel and others were talking, that I realized I completely forgot to mention anything about the whole date shift change. And the reality is that we put up, everything's been changing, evolving, in process. So we haven't even had a chance since the board made the decision on moving the actual office by 2 months and shifting the whole timetable by 2 months. Now we have to go back and update everything and figure out the implications of that and how it's going to work. So basically, normally submission deadlines are October 1. We're now shifting that 2 months to December 1. Everything's going to be shifted by 2 months. And we don't, we will see, but that is the plan for that. And that does mean eligibility periods would be moving by 2 months as well.
Great, thank you. Okay, another question here on rules. Is there a new requirement that films be closed captioned this year? Can you discuss that? And if filmmakers aren't familiar with how that works, is there anything similar they need to know about providing captions? And Ranell, same question, any similar requirements for IDA around closed captioning?
So just to clarify, there's a difference. I think sometimes folks get confused that there's one thing about rules requirements to qualify the film, and then there's the submission process to then submit your film to be considered. And I think a lot of times people get the two different ones confused. So we did add specifications for submitting that we are now providing closed captioning to our members on our streaming platform. That's been something that a lot of members have reached out and really felt was important for us to have, which I'm really glad we were able to turn that around and make that available for this year. So we are requesting that as part of the delivery requirements, but that's part of the submission. It's not really necessarily about the qualification.
Okay.
So for the IDA awards, you are not required to have closed captions until we get to the nomination process. So when when members are voting on Best Feature and Best Short, all of those projects are required to be closed captioned. But we are moving towards, next year we will be moving towards requiring closed captioning.
So that would be all films that made onto the shortlist.
No, it would just be our nominees.
Nominees. Okay, got it. Okay. David, a question for you about national press. What role does national press play in getting on the awards program shortlists?
I think national press plays a big part of that. When we're entering into, even like with the virtual cinema, we've seen that a lot of films were being reviewed across the board from different outlets. So I think as much as you can get press on your film and really going after as many outlets as you can. I mean, for some of us, we're going after everything that we can get on Rotten Tomatoes for a couple of things. So like if we're going to go virtual, we know that the person that's watching virtual, they're like, well, what should I pick this week? And we've talked to a number of people, they're like picking like, well, it's, I've got relatives that tell me like, well, your film is 95% on Rotten Tomatoes, so I'm going to watch your movie. I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't even know they look at stuff like that, but people do look at stuff. So it's something we want to take a look at. Anything that we can get our stories on, especially documentaries that have that national impact, would be really great. I mean, we're living in a time where busting through the noise is always really hard. But if you can find that place or find that one or two or three champions, like I said, champions before, that are in the press that can take it to the national, and maybe this is the story that they want to push through, then maybe that's where it's going to be helpful. So it's always going to be helpful to have folks on your team who have those relationships with with the people that are in the national spotlight, anything from NPR, anything you can get on what the podcast was at 1A, anything that you can just give your film that life to just come, to breathe through the noise of what's going on, because there's a lot that's going on there, is really going to be helpful. Again, it's like looking at everybody that's in your, as Chris was saying, everybody that's on your crew, they would probably know someone who knows somebody. It's always, it's always like that. So national is important, but also too, do not discount any of the smaller folks too, because they also have a platform. If your film is like, look what's specific. So we're working on mucho more with Netflix. So we know there's a strong Latino, Latinx, arena where everybody knows who Walter Mercado is. So that's important. So you want to lean into it. But on the national level, there are a lot of folks who are producers that work for Good Morning America, that work for these larger things that they know Walter. So maybe this could be their film or their story that they want to like bring to their network or their show, that they can say, look, I want to do this story on Walter because he meant so much to me. So look for things like that, that your film fits into. It doesn't have to always be, really like drudgery or like, oh, we have to be on NPR. Be on anything. You can be, podcast is really good. Anything that's radio, like look at what Chris did. They started their own podcast. Consider this. I mean, that's brilliant because like nobody else is doing it. So let's take advantage of the situation. I think that's the other thing you want to take a look at. While people are at home, what are they doing? And get the word out. Find ways to get the word out to your people that will be your audience.
I'm trying to figure out if you just said NPR was drudgery, but
if I could just add something to that too, I think, national press, I think is really important. I think Tom can verify the number, but I feel like it was something like 160 or 170 feature docs were in competition for the Oscar last year. I think it would be physically impossible for anybody to watch all 160, unless that's literally maybe somebody could write a book about just watching all the docs, but except for maybe Tom, who watches them all. But I think, you have to break through the clutter, in some way. And so I think national press is super important. But then the other thing is you can look at places where there are a lot of voters. So we'll spend as much time booking local press in LA and New York and London and places where we know there's a lot of voters as we will on national press. So it's a real strategy of getting to become part of the conversation and then focusing in on where voters are.
Great. And I just want to pick up on something David mentioned, virtual theatrical. And this is a whole new sector of the market. And we're all just figuring it out. And now we're maybe going to be seeing a lot more drive-ins. And so for Belly of the Beast, could you describe a little bit do you know yet what those screenings will look like that you've announced with the Roxy and Mill Valley Film Festival? And is virtual and outdoor, are those part of the landscape? And then Tom, what will the Academy do with those different types of theatrical categories?
I think that everyone has questions about what the fall will look like or what things might even look like in a month. And so none of us really have the answers right now. I know with the Roxy and the Ranell Film Center that they are prepared to open for physical theatrical, whether that be at 25% capacity or something different, in addition to having platforms for the film to be available with a virtual theatrical. I know that there's some discussion with some theaters about drive-ins or outdoor screenings. I think it's all TBD based upon how the cases are looking and what our landscape looks like at that time.
Great. And Tom, as those different things evolve, what will be considered official theatrical?
Again, it's evolving. I mean, I can't say beyond what I know for the immediate path forward. I think the key I like to just emphasize to everybody is that we saw clearly that like if we had just kept it to just LA or just LA and New York, that would have been very limiting. And so I think really the expanding to these 6 cities gives, hopefully, in theory, more theaters. Again, we don't know which theaters are going to reopen and when in those cities, but I think again, it's going to have to just be evolving based on when those start to reopen, how long they can stay open when we get to the fall. I mean, it's going to be a fun year, but I guess it's just, so it's hard for me to wrap my head around some of the long-term plans. We're just trying to get through month by month. But I think the key is we wanted to just be able to show that we're going to be adapting to it. We're going to be evolving. We have more time now. Submission deadlines are later. Voting process is going to be later. Everything, we have a little bit more room to breathe and get through and find our way.
Can I just reiterate something that Chris had said? Really, for other filmmakers that are watching or listening, you guys are, the people who are in here are trying to think like, oh, I'm going to make a run this year. Come up with a strategy that you think you're going to do, right? And just be ready to pivot when you need to pivot. If it looks like, oh, I'm going to plan my theatrical brick and mortar according to Academy rules in either New York or LA. So pick your theater now. Talk to them where you can book it. Get that piece of paper that says this is what I'm going to do. And let's say you're going to plan it for October, right, or November, whenever it's going to be you're going to do, and it's still not open. So then just pivot. Then you can figure it out. Don't wait is all I'm saying, because then you're going to get stuck when it gets crushed. Say they open, then you just get crushed with everything that's going to be trying to premiere at Telluride or Toronto or Venice or whatever those other film festivals that are be out there. I mean, one thing that we're really clear about is what's coming down in fall, because everybody's rushing right now to get that COVID documentary done. I don't know how many there are going to be, but there's going to be at least 2 that are going to try to run in there. So you're going to be tending with that. There's going to be stuff about all the protests and the demonstrations of it. So understand what the landscape is. But if you are sitting here in this Zoom webinar with us and you've got a film that you're about to do, sit down with your people now. Talk about what you want to do, start planning, because you do not want to be left out like, oh, I should have done that. Do it now. So that's it. And Tom is so good. I'm sorry, not trying to put you on the thing, but you're so good about getting back to people. And it's really about like, okay, this is what you do, keep me abreast so I know what's going on. You know, that's the only thing I would, if you can walk away with anything out of this conversation, is plan, plan, plan. Take advantage of IDA, whatever they're doing with their extended. So build your film so that your film is at the top of the list for everybody.
And I will just add that, yeah, like David was saying, let's say you have a planned theatrical at a certain time and you're going to go for that plan, even if the theaters are open, not open, they have to close. The point is then you have that as your planned theatrical, so we can then proceed with it, you know, being submitted and considered. And I think that's the key is that we just, you know, you just have some sort of plan in place, decide what works best for your film to get your film out there. You know, like I said earlier in the requirements, you know, we added some qualifying festival routes or other avenues. The reality is we just wanted to give filmmakers more options. Doesn't mean that they have to submit. Like you were saying, Chris, you have a film that had a couple festivals. We're not saying that they have to submit right this moment. If they're eligible, that's up to each individual film. If they are wanting to try to do fall theatrical, they can do that. If they're thinking they're going to wait till 2021, you know, again, the films have their decision on what they're going to make for what's best for their film. We just wanted to be able to provide some different avenues so people, you know, have that flexibility.
Great. Okay, we have time for one final question, and this one kind of relates back to the initial point about the resources that it takes to mount a campaign and the things that maybe, you know, people waging campaigns in the past may have spent money on. Food and drink receptions, things like that. So the question is, we have heard that during the current wind up to shortlists and nominations, in lieu of being able to invite Academy members to screenings followed by food and drink receptions, films are being sent with dinner and movie type gifts, even some with wine and champagne to Academy members at home. Is that allowed?
I want to be on that one. Who's getting wine and champagne?
I know, sign me up.
All over Instagram, everybody's baskets. People are like, look, I got a bottle. Look, I got some hand warmers. Yeah, it's all over Instagram.
So are there any rules around that, Tom?
There are campaign regulations. In my defense, that is not under my purview.
Fair enough, fair enough.
So I have a wonderful, heroic colleague of mine who works on the campaign regulations. And again, I think at the same time, you have the regulations written for a specific set of circumstances, and now we are in a different set of circumstances. So that will have to adapt. But I'll have to, that's all I can say.
Right. Sounds like people maybe have to start making some really good baked goods or something. You know, I'm always thinking about like the way that I could do something if I don't have any money. Well, I'm going to bake some muffins. Anyway. Okay. Thank you all so much. Really, really appreciate your time. And thank you to everyone who tuned in for it. Like I said, this will be available in a few days as a recording on our website. So feel free to share it around with other folks. And if you had a question that didn't get answered here, you can go ahead and send it to info@documentary.org and we'll see if we can get it answered for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.